Hello everyone, today I wanted to talk about St. Columbanus and the Easter controversy, and technically I'm still wondering why, I should indulge in, this topic mostly, but I think that it's worthy for our reflections on uh, strategic culture, but, a vision of the world, an existential motivation in a sense that we can assume from the study of history and of war as we started. I'm glad that we started this year, telling the truth, talking about war per se and making quite important points, not just through the Filmkriege series, but also, for example, enucleating the concepts such as the objectivity and subjectivity of victory and defeat, and generally speaking, what's the motivation behind what we do in everyday life, because we all have our struggle out there, and I would say that's the beauty of life. If I would have left this for a conclusion, but of course I don't think the value of life stands in achieving happiness per se, but in actually accomplishing something. That the idea that you can always make the difference in any situation, as long as you're in charge, as long as you're provided with this incredible gift of life. That is something that you should always be considering. Here, naturally, the thing takes also on a kind of a spiritual character, and more of that later. But to make the long story short, and you know that I don't like to talk much about myself, also because you would say who cares, legitimately, but I began to test myself as a hamster, or to the things that happen in my life, and trying to report what I can parallel with the things we teach, we study here, we observe. In the last 4 months, I've lived perhaps the most emotionally intense period in my life, because I say it easily, I've fallen in love, for not for the first time, of course, but in a way that, compared to the previous ones, was incredibly. It was enormous. It's something that I still can't recollect. I can't motivate it, and it's important to be lucid. It's important to be logical, rational, firm, because I do believe emotions and feelings are what drive you, right? Many people say you should be driven by reason. Well, reason, yes, should provide you with the tools to cope with the reality as it brutally exists, especially from a practical point of view. But let's be honest, first of all, we are not rational. We're not even mostly rational, we're mostly irrational, and all things we do are fundamentally driven by irrational reasons, right? Then we can make reasonable in the way we want to achieve them, right? And that's where the smart thing comes useful, and that's what the Clausewitzian theory is about. And turns out that yesterday, after a time, I will spare you, of course, any personal detail or anything, that it's over. I lost this girl. I don't think I lost her I will never hear from her again, or we won't talk about this again. But I received a pretty and moving answer from her, because it's not about us. There's nothing wrong. It's the circumstance, and what's happening in the world has to do with that, but it's not just that, and that's also why I won't digress on it. And so, imagine you care about the. It's difficult to talk about it, but you lose the person that you would do everything for. So, sorry, I will try to. I'll not make it emotional, because honestly, I don't. I'm a kind of sensitive person, as you've probably understood from many of my videos. But there is a value in this. You see, when imagine you have bet on a very high stake, an enormous bet, and you lose everything. And we all know that, because it happens at so many levels, and then you lose that. So it's a struggle. Von Clausewitz speaks of this of war objectively as this kind of business-like, transactional trade metaphor, almost like someone gives, someone takes, and that there is a balance. Values change. And life is largely like that too. And this is something that will mark me. That the first moments are terrible because independently, I think this will impact my life. In my past, I had similar experiences. Actually, the only one, the only one time I did fall in love before it was like that, and that's how serious it was. And honestly, I thought it was more than 10 years ago. I thought at this point it would never happen to me again. Instead, it did. It was something so violent I couldn't even think a human being could feel such a thing. I was surprised by myself. I thought that, over time you get colder, and some such things do not happen anymore. And the worst about it is that it worked, right? And it probably would work because I naturally beg to differ on that topic. But there is a moment in which you have this big blow, the big halt, this big you fall on the ground, you're overthrown, and that's the moment in which you are defeated, because we have seen how how things such as victory and defeat take on a subjective meaning mostly. Like victory and defeat, what are they? We made a video on it, so I won't repeat myself, but the concept is essentially that, and this is especially seen between the contendants, that there can be an absolute value in a sense, but this absolute value in reality will never be fully calculated. What matters is how subjective this thing actually becomes. That is, I often make the example of the great empire, the great power want to crush the small community, etc. Of course, small community threatened by annihilation is evaluating the outcome of that war as something of extreme importance, right? Let's assume the big empire loses that, and what is the importance of that defeat for the empire, right? And what's the importance of the victory for the small? Here, it doesn't even take an absolute, it's not even compared to the proportions of the two contendants, but really the meaning that eventually that takes is given. Why? Because there is it's emotional, it's psychological in a sense, right? It's not measurable, probably meant. It's very easy to find people that believe, I don't know, that certain wars have been won or lost depending on, I don't know, their political views of stuff like that. And there is a rhetoric, let's say, of the lost cause, in a sense, that we all like, because we like the tragically heroic figures, mostly, and we need to think that there is somebody who fights for a reason that goes beyond any other, even when the odds are hopeless, fundamentally. Well, I mean, in absolute terms, I don't think that this is possible, humanly speaking. But definitely a situation like when you love someone more than yourself, that is possibly the thing that gets the closest to, right? And in war, you may not see that, because you see that often the dark political interests. Also, we like to mostly picture that, but we often don't understand that behind that, right? And that's one of the few times where maybe it's useful to focus on the individuality of the experience. Of course, there is so much at stake that comes from affections, right? There is something, I must say, this relation taught me that I didn't feel before. Like, I became more emotional. I allowed myself to be vulnerable under that point of view, which it hardly happens, because in real life I'm kind of an asshole with people, and not because I like doing it, but generally speaking, I speak my mind quite directly. I don't I don't like compromises. I don't care very much about what other people think, and I generally have my own opinion. This thing made me understand so much about looking, beyond the surface, right? And it tested my emotional capacities and resources, like, very intense, as it's still doing, right? How am I able to even make a video today? I don't really know, because if it depended, I mean, it helps me, of course, and so I'm I'm annoying you with this whining, but the question is that I got to do something like, starting to cry over killed people when I study my military stuff, right? I began to think of things like, that I always knew, and that nobody had to teach me in that regard, but emotionally, telling how much that trigger. Speaking of moral resources, right? Because I began to cry over thinking, I don't know, that for every of those, millions of people, sometimes you read on a page at the end of a war, say, were killed. Those were people. There were guys that somebody was awaiting for back at home, and that they wouldn't come back, right? And I am cynical sometimes, because when it's obvious that when you start from a commanding position, you have to make a difference exactly for those people. You have to literally erase from your mind that an action of yours can kill, I don't know, 5,000 people, more or less, right? That depend on you, and never forget the responsibility that commands have in this regard. So when you want to reason through the art of war, you have to in a certain sense, dehumanize yourself, because that's paradoxically the most humanitarian thing that you can do, right? I began thinking of these things, right? When you read, like I've done, tons of pages constantly about bloodshed, it's trying to make sense, rationalizing, reading through all these, military operations, and simply, trying to isolate the military rationale, the military logic, the art behind it. You do forget. You do tend to forget. It's natural for the aforementioned reason to forget about the sufferance behind that, and that's something that I must say goes against my my good Clausewitzian pupil standards, because von Clausewitz is rarely emotional in his work, and the few times he stresses as a memento never to forget what can be the sufferance of a person in war, right? And believe me, even this personal relation of mine has to do with that, right? Because, and I don't add reasons here, but that is real for some people. For most of us, it's not, right? Fortunately, and I wish you all that. But for some people, it is, and these people are the ones you love sometimes, and that is, you have to make that effort, and it's not easy, because especially when somebody maybe tells you things like, I don't know, history will always be your true love, and not me, right? I'm not the right one for you, and that hurts. That wants to make you throw away everything you've done here. If there wasn't a reason for doing it, which I believe, and I try to explain it, that by knowing history better, we can be better persons for ourselves, for people who will come for after us, and that there is a deep meaning that you have to try to after all make these sacrifices for a greater purpose that does invest individuals. And this I've tried to say, and that wasn't just the problem, to tell you the truth. But there is some of it in the meanwhile, because this person, to me, she was like, we had very similar interests, and albeit we in the same very similar field practically, but very different activities, but that were important for us, and there surely are for understanding military history, warfare, medieval warfare specifically. So this whole thing was permeated uh, with an important meaning for me at all levels, because there were striking coincidences too in this regard. Well, um, this effort brings you to think naturally at every kind of loss. It makes you realize that in the world, I can say even just in the past, because this goes on everywhere at some level. Such sufferance is everybody's by a certain standard. In that, um, those who are lucky to were blessed by a better quality of life, that have their means, that are not exposed to most of these problems, uh, shouldn't turn their head away, right? It should help those who suffer, who struggle. This may seem this is something that I honestly also didn't fully acknowledge until I loved someone, which may seem strange. I mean, for my family was kind of obvious, but love in the form of the sentimental, even aimed at, of course, having a future to get family and so on. It's something that makes you reflect also on the management of this. Like in the idea of you have to make that freaking difference. You have to engage yourself. You have to commit yourself, and that is also strategical in a sense. It does require this vision, this firmness. You don't have to lose your control in the darkest hour, because von Clausewitz speaks essentially that thinking about the future, we live in a non-deterministic reality. At least apparently it's so complex anyway that complicated anyway that we can't sort it out easily. And it's as if it wasn't deterministic. Then of course you can't be possibilist, whether you believe in free will or in in destiny, in a sense that everything is already it's no coincidence in a way. It's probably both, right? And that's also why a good philosophical take on such matters is necessary, not to exclude one or the other. And the Clausewitzian theory in this does a good job, because it first of all terrorizes you almost with the realization at the beginning in the first books of that we can't sort out this world of ours, that this thing doesn't even belong to us, right? It's something that we happen to be and we have to make sense of, and we are first of all the ones that make sense of it. It's like the concept of victory and defeat, as we were saying before. But also that, however, there is a positive difference that you can do every time, and that in spite of the difficulty that happens, in the range of things you can do, your motivation, your self-control, your also coup d'oeil and general sensitivity and synthesis capability can bring you from A to B in a positive sense, or even if it's not a straight line, but it can lead you somewhere. Maybe you wouldn't even imagine you could arrive. And there is a positive value. There is, in this reality, it's something that we evidently see functions in some way, but we can't fully grasp at the core, the essence of it. Sometimes not even in a physical sense properly meant, if you really scratch, deep inside of it. But there is this terrific sense of empowerment that derives from it. In these, especially in the last couple of months, the situation had gone worse. So I used, like, for the first time, not really, but in this, given the cruciality of circumstance, I used for the first time von Clausewitz as my life coach and sentimental advisor. And I decided to believe in it, to believe in the fact that the gates of hell shall not prevail after all, and that is something that that even here, of course, it's a biblical reference, but it does make sense in that pattern. Now, I will not, become, start a sermon or a preaching, general about, even the meaning of the Bible in a broader sense, independently from the religious, content, but in the actual description of or an existential condition that I consider to be very spot on, right? And that's so another valid reason for reasons. But I mean, I distinctly remember those passages from the Funkriege where von Clausewitz says, look, when the best you can do in your life is to maintaining controlling yourself exactly in the darkest hour, because if you can do that, if you make that effort, right, and we always can, right, we know it hurts, we know it's something that grips you inside, like, it squeezes you inside like a giant grip inside the chest. I've been living for 4 months now with a freaking pathology. Like, I feel like that. I feel I have mood swings. I have tension in my flesh. I can't sleep at night. I mean, I'm a freaking wreck, right? So this is something that takes a psychophysical impact on me. I know it's supposed to work like that, because that is exactly what nature triggers you with, in order for you to start doing stuff, right, for what is needed in that moment for that person. And it's hard, right, when you're deprived, for example, of communication, or you have other problems, that person suffers, etc. You feel powerless, you feel scared, you wake up every day and you go to sleep every night, like, thinking, what the hell is going to happen? In a broader sense, in an existential sense, that is, this whole thing means so much for the both of us, right? And yet I have to be strong, and that is exactly what I believe that the Funkriege told me. I mean, the idea that you can't, if there is a moment in which you can do the most positive, action effort in terms of actual positive consequences, is the hardest of times. We know it even psychologically speaking, right? Even after, breakups in general, when there are researches that show that fundamentally the persons who accepted the first thing, the thing immediately, right, at the first moment, and at least, maybe they even still hoped for it, but, made sense of it. They didn't trick themselves into thinking it wasn't, it was different, right? And prolonging their suffering, which is different from pain, because suffering is self-inducted, are the ones who are gonna make a more positive impact on their lives, and they're going to recover more easy. I don't know whether I will ever recover, in the sense that I have a great trust in my moral resources, but I know from past experience that certain things will mark you forever, that certain things are meant to last for a lifetime. And I believe it. I do believe it. I believe in many other things, and that do require faith, in a sense. This is, to me, I approach it scientifically speaking. I try not to be subjective about it, but those researches showed me how that basically they overlap with the Clausewitzian theory, because von Clausewitz says the same thing, that the more in control you are in the hardest of time, and the better, and everything will go, if it has to go, because things can also go dramatically worse, but if that was enough, everything will go literally downhill from there on, right? Okay, maybe not always, but given that specific struggle, right, you will have done your best if you try to put things together at a distance, because you still thought that thing was tenable, and you went on for it, while where you were essentially cannibalizing yourself. But if you remain in control, if you were able to essentially to discipline yourself, I made a great work of self-control. I realized that thanks to that feeling, I could achieve things I didn't believe I could be able to do, because this thing gave me the most positive feelings I've ever felt in my life, and that's one of the reasons why today I talk to you about defeat and the value of it. I'm not going to talk about the usual stuff and then the victors and what's the deal with them. The fact that, of course, victory is more celebrated in our culture, and it's explainable, of course, because I would say what's the point, of celebrating a defeat in a sense. The point of fighting is not to, let's say, to participate, right? It's to win, right? But it is true, as we have seen, that given the relative, subjective and hence relative value of victory and defeat, that in a sense, if you're still alive afterwards, or if you haven't lost too much, what you will have gained in terms of information about feed, about that fight, about the war, about yourself, about others, is going to be probably one of the single most important experiences in your life, right? I in my life I've never suffered. I mean, I did suffer defeats, but they were, like, in a sense, they were defeats as long as I believed they were defeats, right? And this is not a matter of moral relativism, because it's like when you break up, and you can't go on, and maybe the other person leaves on for a better future. Maybe because you left yourself badly and each other badly, and it was kind of resentment, etc. And that person has a better time than you, and you feel defeated, right? I guess I wouldn't like to say something to it, but for men especially, that are much more competitive and much more aggressive, so much closer in a sense to this specifically combative it's in existence. It's maybe harder, right? It's showed, I think, relatively easily that I'm not entirely sure, but I think women not they can't deal better with breakup at the end of the day, but they have more chances to make it in life on average, so that compensates them better. Men usually have this more aggressive mindset, but we do suffer a lot from some certain things, and we generally speaking do, because we realize that our options are not so many, right? Independently from what the biological mechanisms that regulate even reproduction have to do. I mean, from a social, cultural point of view, let's be honest, if the goal is having a family, women succeed more easily than men. And this is statistic evidence. So that takes a toll in a world like ours. And that is deep. It takes on an existential meaning, as you understand. But the attention towards defeat in this regard is something that I always advise to look up closely. Why? Because educationally speaking, in all things, let's say, can be political, moral, military in this sense, or even social, the outcome of a defeat is much is on average much more crushing than the one of victory. Yes, of course, the balance can shift. It can be Pyrrhic victory, and then but as we've seen in war, odds most of the times are pretty well balanced, because as long as if the asymmetry is too high, chances are that the weaker side will be less likely to fight, and to fight in the first place. And therefore victories, and that's why I was talking about, defeat, and that's why I was talking about the rhetoric of the lost cause, is the privileged moment to see that darkest hour happening, right? This is important essentially for the instrumental relation that von Clausewitz establishes between politics and war, meaning that the causes that had the motivation that had brought you to war, right, which are not random structuralist systematic causes, with maybe some cyclicity, as some wants to see war like. No, wars are always fought by people who decide to fight for a freaking reason. Because without that, it's not the industry, it's not the. It's all intertwined, but it's because somebody chooses to do it. Right, so men are not sent in the meat grinder for no reason. Communities do not fight because there is just a limited element that brings to war. No, they are largely, surely responsible. Right, they're the most responsible in relative terms, and in absolute terms, if we really want to be to shift the thing at a moral level, right, that brings to war. So you got in that thing because you believed you could win, as we were saying before, because otherwise you wouldn't even fight. So you had your reasons, whichever they were. It could have been wrong, right? You may have planned this badly. You could have had, too much self-reliance. It may have miscalculated lots of things. This happens in any war to anybody. This is interesting because, you see, this is something that puts in common both the winner and the defeated. Right, and that's why maybe also sort of human, sort of chivalry sometimes emerges from war, because at the end of the day, it's a shared experience. The difficulties of it go beyond the, let's say, the mere antagonism between the two sides, but they definitely present you with a critical problem of decision most of the times, and what to do next. And remember, you can always do the better thing. That's the problem, because in war it never stops to, okay, now we go at war, we were the best ones, we won. No, you have to struggle through it, which is the thing. You can always be lost in a sense. So the motivation lives on. That the motivation is what fuels conflict, right? Then eventually war can break out or not, right? Because we have explained many times the difference is still neglected by many, also informers, etc., that between conflict and war. Conflict is when you're triggered. You have that reason that there is a conflict, there is a conflict between two people, and for some reason over something, it's a struggle over something. War is when you actually use violence to solve it, and that's how it happens, right? And you understand that you can't really, the conceptually you can't really confuse the two things, because they are very different, right? One is the enmity, the thing that would bring you to strike, and then war is the actual strike, right? It's when you hit, when you use violence. In general. So the defeated lives on in a way or another. It's rare to find a war where an entire people is literally wiped out, for which it doesn't live on in defeat. Defeat is devastating, right? It's something that probably you see, while individuals have, after all, some kind of moral control in themselves, because they are themselves. Well, in war this can give origin to enormous complications, because the system is much more complex, right? So if a country is defeated, it gets messed up at a point that it's not just about the wishful thinking of every the sum of the various individuals that will solve the problem. No, it's something that requires a much greater skill and capacity and cooperation and collective education and training and so on. So there are huge problems deriving from that, and just look at countries that are devastated by war, historically speaking. They turn out to be a mess most of the times. They pay for it deeply, right? And that's the ugly face of war, right? So first of all, when something, I hope not, but you've probably experienced something similar to what I'm going through. First of all, think about that. Think about stories of people killed, family members, houses destroyed, fortunes lost, poverty, misery at all levels, right? But moral, the material one, and think of what the outcome of that. I mean, how many unhappy people will be rising from the ashes of that? How many social political problems will stem from it? How much lack of means, of opportunities, or how much resentment? Right here, we don't want to insist on that, because um, that that is also interesting, because there are people who are still somewhat resentful about certain things happening in the past, but that mostly reveals this. I mean, revanchism is a form of weakness. Let's be honest. I mean, it's a way basically to ignore, to acknowledge a reality, right? That that's also why conspiracy theories are so popular, because they basically unburden, even if it actually doesn't happen, people from in fact they free people to confrontate with the burden of reality, right? And that is not useful for them, but not even for others, because they cause problems and the thing gets perpetuated. Don't think we live in a world where people are actually going so better. Like we know, even from polls, from data, from inquiries, statistics, that politically speaking, there is an ever greater part of the population basically is giving up even simple principles like reasons, critical skills, scientific education, like as founding criteria to measure the world, right? It's all about the conspiracy. It's about I told you like that because that thing happened, and I really think it's because of that. Oh yeah, so it's true, right? Many people do reason like that. I wouldn't be surprised if some of you actually, because we all do it at some level. We all have that kind of paranoid take sometimes that brings us there. But reality, unfortunately for us, doesn't give it. Fortunately, maybe, because that teaches us that the hard way, but still the good way. That it's worthless. Nobody cares. I mean, reality doesn't care about what you think. In case you didn't notice. So in the defeat, first of all, we have to spot always the motivation. I mean, we have to be objective about the fact that something so great like a war is not exclusively based on, let's say, even if the broader decision was taken for objectively evil reasons, right? Think about, I don't know, World War II or so on, but leaving aside that there is evil also from other sides, and so it's never black or white only, but a lot of gray in between. You have always to acknowledge that yes, there is, and this does fall sometimes in the propaganda of those conspirationalists, a motivation that is worth listening to, right? You don't have to agree with it, you don't have to share its values, but you have to understand, if anything, why that group, those people, did what they did. Because it strikes you sometimes how even the simple ignorance of a, after all, well-balanced person can lead to disasters. However, usually people do these things for reasons that oppress them for a way or another. So from their perspective, they couldn't take another option apparently for them, but using going to war, right? Which I repeat, it can be might have been even for the good reason, right? Not just for the bad one. In fact, what I would say here it's that of course the defeated to us is also the loser, generally speaking. Yeah, that guy lost. What a loser, right? And that guy probably will get something from it that others had, or others had, of course, already, but that for him will be more important at that point than what was happening before. So when a loss strikes you so violently, you are basically without. You feel lost because everything you bet on, everything you believed in at the point of undertaking that struggle, is cancelled, doesn't exist anymore. I mean, you had framed yourself in that mindset, within that mindset that brought you up to that point and made you believe in it, gave you the famous moral resources to accomplish that, and then you failed in spite of all, right? So the importance of defeat at that point is that in war, as we were saying before, you might have lost actually too much, right? In interpersonal life, this can happen too, and believe me. Um, but at the same time, I mean, maybe you have not exploded under a bombardment, so that's what I mean, and you can still make sense of your own cognitive faculties, and you can observe how, first of all, it wasn't all bad. I mean, a reason that there is something within the reasons that you did this for, that you don't have to give up hope for, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all have, we all do things at the end of the day for something we believe is right, or is, yes, I say right, not good, because we may understand that by doing certain things, they may have a cost. They higher the risk often, they higher the bet. They higher usually the moral development that stays behind that, and the possible accomplishments that you can achieve, right? Moral resources come to fuel this eventually. So if you are very motivated and you have a good reason, it's difficult that something can ever stop you, right? And in a situation like this, I can tell you that you arrive at this point, you say, what do I do? Do I give up? Because honestly, I was waiting now some time, because from April everything will change. Like in these 2 weeks now, I will finish my thesis finally. I don't know. Banally, springs arrives when tomorrow. There is another air. It's the second year of this pandemic. There's so much hope. For Christians, Easter is near. There is this idea of resurrection, this idea of coming back with a reinvigorated soul that can fight once again. So just imagine, for me at this point, what it means, this dying winter, to have brought me to this point. I've lost the person that I care about the most. It's hard, right? I wonder like what I will do afterwards, because yes, now I finished this work that occupied me for 3 years and a half, and 3 years and a half I was a completely different person. I didn't even start my previous relationship that ended this year. I mean, last summer, in 3 years and a half ago. I wouldn't like myself 3 years and a half ago, or maybe I would like something of it that I still would like to be at, in a sense, and that I can't have again. I do feel the sense of time passing, going by, these opportunities, these failures accumulating, the existential weight becoming ever stronger, and it's hard, because you may say, well, at this point it's a moment I would give up, because you need that motivation. If you believed you had found the motivation in your life that in 30 years you had not even imagined could arrive, and then you have lost it after having had paradise that you didn't believe could be humanly possible, you do feel like you want to let yourself go. But in this moment, there is something there that when you truly believe, remember what I said before, when you truly believe in something, because you think it's right, it doesn't have to eventually even make you win or lose. It's the right thing. Sometimes we do things and there is a reason why we do things for the right thing, because we know that things are likely not going to go the right way, right? But if we miss that chance, to do better, we lose all our own righteousness. That is to say, we lose the most precious thing that we have as human beings. That is our faculty to think, to be doing something better for humanity in itself. And if I hadn't loved, and hell as I do still, this girl so much as I've actually done, um, I would let myself go. Um, because well, maybe I wouldn't be so loaded in strength, but because I would care less. But since I do, um, now it feels so hard to have lost the the point why I was doing it. Right? Maybe I hope. Honestly, I still hope. Yes, maybe it's not healthy from a psychological point of view because I still didn't go paranoid. I was able to be in the love phase. You know that these things are studied scientifically. I'm still hyped, like at the beginning. It's something incredible. It goes far beyond the usual time, as far as I understand, especially with these physical symptoms. I haven't gone paranoid. I don't want to go paranoid. And if the way I feel though, I know that is right. So for the same reason I've loved this person, I cannot give up, even in defeat, because if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't I wouldn't have any other reason to live on. I would disappoint. I would betray my same feeling that I have towards her, because I would destroy myself. I would. I wouldn't. I would be good for nothing. Instead, these are the moments which, even if or somebody who's approaching defeat, who knows that everything is lost, it can do even a last stand. Maybe I will give up. Maybe I will say, today, for example, I said, well, do I make a video anymore? I don't feel like anymore. I'm tired of this pandemic. It ruined everything. It makes me feel bad. It brought to so many negative things at this point, and it keeps doing, and it will keep staying there. My life in that regard, and I will be thinking about it, obsessively, because it's always the same story, same data every day, and so on. Things will hopefully go better, but there's still a long way to go, and I say, what will I do in my next months, my next years? Like, how can I go on when I've lost the thing that I thought that could make me pass everything of this, because I had finally the purpose of doing it? Well, if I truly didn't believe that that was the most righteous thing to do, I would give up. Instead, I will not. I will make this my last stand. I will make my last fight. I will go on for myself, and for showing the person that I love, that I that I can uh, that I can leave onto my principles. That was not false, right? And in the name of it, that's a lot of things like this are done. I Even von Clausewitz had such problems. Von Clausewitz was prevented to from marrying Marie, his future wife, eventually, after many years. He would succeed because the same King of Prussia would fundamentally allow consent it because of social problems, because he wasn't rich enough. Fundamentally, she came from one of the top families, and it was essentially an English Prussian family, and this person, I mean, he went to war in the meanwhile, and he always wrote to her. I always thought, and I think, think in the freaking 19th century what it meant to even go to war and knowing you could die like a mosquito, like von Clausewitz actually would die, as you know, of illness in the Polish uprising eventually. So, but the courage, the moral force that it was needed for a person even to just write for the last time before a battle to his beloved. This is something that happened in every war, right? That happens in every day. It happens, I don't know, every time a policeman goes out there to his night duty. A fireman is called because there is a building on fire with people trapped inside of doctors and nurses that have to heal this diseases and they risk a lot in many ways. All the people that really fight every day their own battle, right, risking truly their lives and therefore to disappear for those who they love and they're loved by. And this may be the best thing I can come up with, but it feels dark in here, right? It's not nice. Today I felt very down, but very down, and I spare you the details. But I must say I don't think I'm not going to break, right? But not just for this reason, but because these ideas and thoughts have strengthened me over time. I know that this thing will stay with me forever, however it goes, but I finding the strength to fight back. This is or to never give up, or let's say to be always able to put up another fight. This is in the Clausewitz in theory quite clearly the possibly the most important thing in absolute terms, because if you can screw everything up anyway, but if you hadn't the motivation to do it, and the strength for and the determination to rise again and say, okay, I'm still back on my feet, I don't care, well, I think life is really over, right? What it means here to have hope or to have faith in a world that we don't understand, that is so difficult, that it's an obstacle after another, is the only way you can make sense of life. Letting go, it's many people do because sometimes they're really overwhelmed by tragic stories that sometimes are really unspeakable, and yet you can find so much strength in those instances too, right? I know. It wasn't an infatuation. It was something very great. It was enormous, and that's why I'm even worried. And legitimately, one should be worried because you also have to cope with that in some way. You can't simply pretend it didn't happen, right? That's also what the Frankrike says. Like if you pretend that after all the situations you should remain stagnant, more or less see what happens, instead lingering on that, uncertainty, you're going to do worse, right? And there is some sense of pride, of course, that stems from the idea that, however, I have to deserve somebody's recognition for that. And I was thinking about making this video yesterday when the thing happened, and because this person may even watch my videos, which she promised. Now it's difficult to tell you why she wouldn't do, because of reasons now that are personal between us that I can't disclose. But it's very different from how I wanted it to be, because maybe all this Clausewitz and references were unnecessary. Maybe you like more even, for a video like this, it would have been just pure clean drama shouted out. But no, I'm not like that. I don't like it. I don't think it's useful. But that's exactly the point. If it's something that's not useful, you shouldn't do it, right? I could cry. I could once again give up. There are moments when I feared this and said, if something like that happens, I shall give up everything. I shall give up my PhD at the very end of it. I shall maybe think of letting myself go in some way. I don't know, but no, I will not, because I believe in this. And if I believe in this, if I believed that there can be always a better thing to do, that for the person I care about, for myself to be able to deliver that, I can't give up. I have to show that I'm strong, and that I don't give up, that I'm strong as rock, and that I can't be crushed by this. It doesn't work like that, and that's something that that strikes more than anything else. In war, von Clausewitz is honest about this. That's not by itself gonna be enough, because how many armies, fighters, being wiped out just like that, but this show of bravery and of resilience. Yes, but they earned the respect of their enemy. They earned the merit. They earned the consistency. They in a sense they were more useful for their cause, for for sacrificing themselves, than to give up and whine and to simply show that they were weak after all, that they weren't up to the task, that they couldn't succeed. Uh, Other times, however, von Clausewitz says this can actually lead to victory. This can actually be so. There is a point in I think it was the chapters on the retreat of the army. It is somewhat longer. I don't remember because sometimes the chapters is shorter than paragraphs, so it's easily to mess that up. But when there is basically the retreating army, right? It has been already defeated in battle. Is trying to get out of the way before the enemy overwhelms him, and there is this pursuit. Von Clausewitz says, at some point, because things will get dramatically difficult, right, for the pursuit, who is going to be crushed, mentally before than physically even just, but it was likely to melt away. It's a desperate situation because basically you have already been defeated in an open field. So next, you've lost a lot because it's mostly the moral resource there, independently from the material forces. Because that's where in pitched battle you went at each other with all the concentrated force you could have, and if you lost there, you're so demoralized because that was the best you could do. That even sometimes irrationally, but it can't bring you down to be the weaker side. Well, von Clausewitz says if the situation is so desperated. And naturally, there are the possibility of doing that, and you think you're not going to come out of there alive in any other way. Even if the odds are desperate, do something that the enemy does not expect in that situation, because he's so sure of himself because he's chasing you after having crushed you in open field. So strike back, like make this freaking last stand. Don't just wait for him, but attack him in the meanwhile. And he says, as desperate as it sounds, that sometimes does succeed. And it does succeed because it's able, as we will see, to exploit essentially this, nonchalance of the enemy that at that point has relaxed, right, while you have remained legitimately pressured. So I don't know. I can think of some strike back because I will try to talk to her at some point, and because I really care too much, and things were too delicate and complicated than they sound. I mean, relationships are usually complicated, but this one was actually the worst in the sense of that it was the best thing ever that it was put to an end because the fear of the practical implications of it, because due to objective problems that cannot be denied, but that people can work together to overcome, and that we wanted to work together to overcome, right? And there can be, so it's really literally one of those moments in which probably you are expected to fight back. I mean, I expect myself to fight back. I'm not sitting here. I'm going to make sense of this. I accept this, because another thing is, in these moments, as we were saying in the beginning, the best thing you can do is accepting the situation. It's not to act emotionally, to say, okay, now I will begin to cry, to ask her to come back, all this stuff. That doesn't, I haven't even talked to her anymore. And that is also something that has its punching moral effect, given that we've been talking for months every single day, for hours. It was beautiful, and now I do miss that. Because I miss her. She was the best ever for me. I didn't know. I didn't know it could even be like that in reality. it's easy to equivocate on relationships because until you're not into it. I remember it was a colleague of mine some years ago that had a probably a similar problem now that I think about, and then he was very depressed because of such of a lot. It's something similar now that I remember. I mean, they had been together. It was a different situation, but they had been together, and eventually she left him, which was made worse also by other kind of details now I can't reveal about my academic environment, let's say. But she even tried to hit on me, to tell you the truth. This girl that, in fact, I didn't like her. But he felt legitimately destroyed, and I remember of him of this story because it resembles dramatically to mine, and I do understand him now. I will try to. I have to phone him in a couple of weeks because when we finished the same year our thesis, so we started together. The university back in the days. He's kind of a person that we're very different, but I esteem him a lot, and I just wanna, sometimes I do need a friendly voice too. I'm not just about bloodshed and explosions and all this stuff. Cavalry charges, who doesn't love cavalry charges? Let's be honest. So that is a good example of how hard something like that can bring you down, right? I will hopefully never transform Schwerpunkt in a sentimental based channel, but I let's be honest, it's something around which at least that makes things gravitating around the world consistently, right? You would think it's money. No, it's like the famous, it's like Scarface. Like first you get, I don't remember the quality. I don't even want to sponsor. You get first the money, then you get the power. Yes, then you get power. Then you get the women, right? Or I don't remember the order: power, money. It's at the end of the day. That's the thing, right? Never underestimate the power of love, right? Omnia vincit amor, right? If you know Latin literature, Lucretius in the De Rerum Natura, that is true in a sense. I believe that. Then you wonder why fate too. Like having fate. Why is fate important in all this? Because fate is the belief in something that still you can't see, but that you can achieve, right? And having faith is not an expectation mode where you say, okay, I have faith now. Sit here, look at the clock, and something will happen. No, faith means it's something that drives you, something that makes you say, okay, you know what, this thing is difficult, but I pull it off because otherwise, what am I alive for, right? I strongly believe in this. I mean, and the reason why you need faith, that is to say, you don't need just a rational approach, is that, as I was saying in the beginning of the video, we are, first of all, irrational, largely. But secondly, we can't make sense of the world. As I was saying before, like the main problem is that we don't know whether things will succeed or not. So if you don't take a leap of faith, you can't do really anything, right? Then you wonder why we believe in things that we can't properly demonstrate. We're driven by emotional because guess what? We need that. We need that cognitively. We need that just even positively, as we've seen, in order to accomplish something. You have to learn how the world works. That's why history, I guess, it's so powerful as well, because it's the most hopeless enterprise in a sense. I mean, it's not trying to make sense of something, I don't know, very difficult to calculate, that, for, I don't know, physically speaking, it requires generations of research, and with all respect and so on, but at least you have a path to follow. And even in there, I suspect, however, that there is a dramatic amount, as always, of faith in the sense of mostly of curiosity, of something that that is irrational per se, right? It is maybe motivated, of course, it's always by evidence, but it's like, and what if, right? What if something we still don't know? That's the sap of science in itself. But history is worse because history doesn't have um, physical standards. It doesn't have laws, to put it mildly. Of course, any physicist probably will complain, saying that even laws have their flaws because they can't always change in theory. Like if you find a counter evidence to them, which is not likely because they're laws, so they have been tested carefully. But still, what do we know? We still float in something we don't understand. So in history, it's hopeless. You must have faith in a sense because you may never know what you'll get through, right? What your mind will wrap itself around, what perspective you will reach. And history is unique in that regard. As unique is what you can do as a person, as things that nobody else can do. So lacking faith in life is like giving up essentially any hope, any dream. There are many people that I presume are like this. They're kind of cynical. They say, okay, well, I don't care. Life is just something very material, very physical, very there is no magic to it, right? But and if you think there is, show me where it is. Well, the question is, when you had to, in fact, to go after a girl, what did drive you, right? If not fate that you would succeed, that you had to fight for her, right? And this idea to me was tremendously empowering. And in fact, I must say that I'm surprised compared to, of course, I've grown because now I'm more than, as I was saying before, how many years ago that happened? I mean, it was like 13 years ago, the 13 to 11 years ago when I was in love. The only first time before this, I was much weaker. I had much weaker backbone. I was, let's say, I was more motivated, but in terms of the violence maybe of the feeling, but it was also something that didn't have any, was very platonic in a sense. The girl even was not even the right for me. I was just triggered biologically like that. And I had to cope with something I never experienced, so I made a mess. Like today, it's much heavier because I knew what she was worth, I knew what I wanted with her. I'd never wanted something so clearly in my life, to settle down with her, and yet, even in this moment of defeat, I discovered myself that year, all these years of distance, to have a much tougher inward, let's say, than I expected, right? And not because I'm not suffering, not because it's something that won't change my life or that I will forget in 1 month, in 1 year, or in 10 years, but it's because something that I know I've done for the right reason and I should be proud of, even if I lost, because that's I presume what matters at the end of the day. That it's not the insistence, it's not the emotional side. It's what you can practically do in the name of this emotion, this feeling, and that's what makes the difference between a kid and a man. I still don't know whether I passed from one to another, right? Because we always grow up, and as I was saying before, even just 3 years ago, I think of myself mostly like a kid. I don't know. I always seen myself as a kid, telling the truth, sometimes, and that's why I wish I had been even better for her, in a sense. But seemingly I was, and she even said it. But just now there is this impediment, and I wish this thing to to have meant something, because when you're such a deep feeling is spent, you don't want it to have been in vain, right? Even in defeat. So I will try my best to recover, because I honestly believed. Now we'll stop Schwerpunkt, because today, even just finding the next video I'll have to do, I felt such a heavy burden, like say, oh my god, how can I do it? How can I start over again now every day the same old thing? When I said, if you don't do that, because also Schwerpunkt is one of the same reasons. It's one of the same reasons why I loved her, for example. Not because I started it for her, because I didn't know her at the time, but because I also did it for her. As I did my thesis for her, I was doing everything for her, in a sense. Even if she arrived so recently, but it's the same goodness I hope to make with my feeling that I can transmit in these other activities for others, maybe to find. I don't know how you received this video today, because it's kind of personal, let's be honest. But I don't know if you ever felt anything like this, if you're maybe dealing with something like it, or if you ever wonder how it feels. It's like love songs speak of. It's like romantic literature tells you, like it's like those things you couldn't imagine was true until you experience it. I mean, there is a huge difference from any other kind of attraction, of interest, and so on. It's something devouring. It's something unspeakable, and it's beautiful. It's terrifying, but it's also surely the most beautiful thing. And I take it as a miracle, right? When you wonder about fate, and then miracles do happen. Yes, I believe in miracles, right? I didn't before. I had given up, because after all that time I said, well, never happen again. It did happen, and it doesn't, it does matter how this thing ends, but I still feel very blessed, because now I believe again, and it's not something that I will forget so easily. For both because of course this thing will live on, and I suspect this goes for a lifetime, because I never found anyone that remotely could compare to her by scale, like magnitude of scale. So I doubt that this can happen again in that sense, but independently, in the sense that this realization will live on with me, with the blessing that this person gave, with her. Well, I hope she loves me, honestly, because we wanted to tell this to each other when we would finally, but I do believe in this too, and not because I want to exploit that as a hope, as a as a delusion or something, but because I have my reasons that here are not part of the subject matter of debate, but because I know it's possible now, and nothing scares me anymore. I have to be honest. Like before, when I was insecure, this couldn't be real. I was scared, and now I'm not scared anymore, and I'm proud of what I've done. After all, and it's one of the few things I'm really proud of. Right? I mean, with you I'm kind of nice, but in real life I'm kind of arrogant myself. I don't have much compassion. I'm halting at times. I've learned to be better, but especially this experience melted something inside that made me see things I didn't know could be possible. And I write, especially at this point of my life, that was miraculous, because I feel a much better person now than I was before, and all thanks to this person that will remain with me for all my life, no matter what. And if somebody listened up to this point, I would like to thank you, because believe me, for me it was like I have spent a terrible time but this video helped me to vent a little bit. I don't like daily blogs about bullshit, but I try to make this thing strategical, because I do believe it has a strategical meaning. I do believe there is a deeper message to it, that there is literally it's a decisional matter. To me, I must say, the closest thing that struck me, as I was saying before, to the Clausewitzian theory was the idea of control of command, control of yourself during the hardest time. That's a decisional process. That's a commanding process. It's something that you really have to take the reins of, and it's beautiful because they are the reins of yourself. And there is perhaps no more important, let's say, struggle than one with yourself. That makes you grow, because if you manage to win yourself, if you manage to discipline you, to rationalize, to be consistent with yourself, to never lie to yourself, but to always be strong for you, you can do for others what you couldn't even imagine. This is what I hope I have showed I could be able to. And that's why I believe that this can be applied to any human reality, right? That we all can make a difference as individuals, and that is always up to us at the end of the day. No matter how hard it is that things can happen, there is always an extra step we can take. Sometimes we do it for others, sometimes we do it for ourselves, but at the end of the day, it's for all. It's for really also helping each other, and which I think my idea of family and love is based on this, right? As you know, I'm fundamentally a capitalist. I don't have a bit, family-wise, I'm a socialist fundamentally, right? So, meaning that, of course, there is something in common that is made for the sake of the family, which is basically what any state, any nucleus, any society also works like in the sense, right? Without being too radical about definitions. And that happens when there is a unity, right? When there is a unity of command, of intentions, a clarity of vision, there is the easy way of doing things. You will succeed. Unity is fundamental, and that's why we unite, why we search our significant other, because nature tells us that we are better when we are for each other like that. And it's something that I know there are many people that maybe are even skeptical about certain aspects of life, or but my advice is always never lose hope in that regard, because literally that can save you morally, can save your faith, can save your beliefs, can save everything you sometimes become too tired to fight for. That can give you the charge again, and you will be impressed by how strong it probably. Here, for a channel of military history, I must say that probably love is really the strongest force in the universe, and I'm not kidding. Alright, so I thank you very much for listening to my event. I will be fine, I promise to you, because I do think about you in that sense. I mean, I wanted to this relation to bring me to something that unfortunately now I don't know whether it will be possible anymore, that had to do with history, that had to do with activities that could have even described and posted in here, because they would have been very, very cool. And I'll see what can be salvaged from that, because I think you deserve maybe to look into that. But I will be here for you, so I don't give up. I don't, for those who care, I stay at my post. As I said, I'm the steadfast tin soldier. I don't leave my post for any reason. Alright, so for now I won't conclude in the same way. I just wish you the best at all times. I'll come back tomorrow. and I really hope that in these times you can recover all the hope, all the strength, all the faith, and all the love you need, because those are really what will save this world, if it will be saved at some point. Until there is that, and as humans there will always be that, there is a concrete chance we can achieve them. So I thank you once again very much for listening to me. I wish you a nice time and see you next time. Bye.